So the people listening on the web can hear it. And we do have lots of people who do watch on the web, either live or after the fact. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start in terms of introductions. My name is Jennifer Dill. I'm a faculty member in the School of Urban Studies and Planning, and along with Chris Monsier and Rob Bertini, my colleagues in Civil and Environmental Engineering, we co-organized this weekly seminar. So welcome to everyone, particularly folks who haven't been here before. And I've already reminded you about the microphones. So without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker, who is Noel Dobson, who's the project manager for the Active Living by Design grant project that was awarded here to Portland that she's going to be talking about.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Do you want to say anything more about yourself?
Sure. I'm sure more will come out as we move forward today, but I graduated a couple years ago from the School of Community Health here. My background's in public health, program planning, and social advocacy. So I've been in this room many times, and thanks for everyone coming. I'm glad that we went around the room to introduce ourselves and give me a sense of kind of where people are coming from. I didn't know what to expect if people would be really transportation focused. Sounds like there's a lot of engineering students and professionals in here. So what I'm going to talk about today is the project that I work on. It's called Active Living by Design. And I was told that the group likes to ask questions and have discussion, and I'm used to facilitating meetings where there's a lot of back and forth discussion happening. So I've kind of structured my presentation so that I can go through some things, and then based on what the group here finds, most interesting, we can spend some more time on and answer your questions, whether that's talking about the link between transportation and health and the idea of using transportation planning as a strategy for health promotion, or more specifically on a couple of the projects that we're working on within the Active Living by Design program. We can talk more specifically about those. So, okay, to start off, this has been up here for a while, so everyone's had a chance to read this, hopefully. I just want to give you a little background on the grant. Active Living by Design is a project that's funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and they support 25 communities across the country to do these Active Living by Design projects. And a group of partners came together to write the grant, and the funds were given to the partnership in November of 2004. I was hired several months later as the program manager and have been around for a year, so we're in year 2 of the grant right now. The lead organization for this project is the Oregon Coalition for Promoting Physical Activity, which I'll tell you just a little bit more about, and the Heart Association. My project director is Dr. Minot Cleveland, who has been a big supporter of physical activity and looking at how environments impact physical activity throughout his career. So these are some of the coalitions and organizations in Oregon that are working on looking at that link between health and transportation and planning and parks and rec, kind of expanding their view of what it means to promote health to people, looking beyond that individual, trying to get you to change your behavior and you to change your behavior and you to change your behavior, but instead looking at the whole environment, looking at the community environment, and how does that make it harder or easier to be physically active during the day. So again, if people want to spend more time kind of talking more about the concept of active living, we can end up doing that, or if people are more interested in learning specifics about the projects. But I just want to point out the Oregon Coalition for Promoting Physical Activity is a coalition with a really diverse membership. They've been meeting for several years. They were very involved in putting together the statewide physical activity plan, and I put the web address on the bottom, intended to bring a copy to show you. But Oregon is one of 2 states that has a comprehensive statewide physical activity plan, and that plan really clearly lays out the fact that they are addressing community environments and looking at environmental approaches to promoting health, which includes looking at how transportation can be used in health promotion. So if you're at all interested, it's a great resource. It really lays out specifically how all the partners think that transportation can be used to improve health. There's also a statewide group that meets called Active Community Environments. And active community environment is a term from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and defined as an active community environment is a place where people of all ages and abilities can be active each day. So these ACE groups, again, similar to the OCPPA and ALBD partnership, bring together people from transportation and public health and senior services and parks and recreation, a really diverse group of people to talk about fostering active community environments. And there's a movement among a lot of the partners in these groups to foster more local ACE groups. There's one group that's being started right now in Gresham so that people can tackle more specific local projects. Sometimes when you have a statewide coalition, it's kind of hard to figure out what to, how to solve a small problem in a community. So if you want any more resources on any of these things or anything that I talk about today, please let me know. So just talking a little bit about the Active Living by Design partnership, as I mentioned, we got the grant in 2004, and we're in year 2. And I just want to show you a few or all of the partners that are part of the partnership. These first 2 slides that I'm going to show you are partners that were part of the original grant and came together to write the proposal. Many are active in the groups that I mentioned before. Particularly the Portland Department of Transportation and the Department of Health and Human Services were really critical in working with OCPPA to get this grant fund. The Robert Wood Johnson funding was extremely competitive, and so we were very fortunate to get the grant. OCPPA is not a 501c3 at this time, and so the American Heart Association is the fiscal sponsor for this grant, so I'm employed by the Heart Association. I have cards here. If people want to follow up with me, I'm at the Heart Association office. And as program manager, I manage the partnership and the coalition activities and also the 3 specific pilot projects that we have. So here's moving along, some more of the partners that are on the original grant. And I wanted to just show you the slide to emphasize the multidisciplinary nature of the work that I'm doing and the group of partners that I work with. So what I've tried to do today is focus on transportation elements of what I'm doing, but certainly there's a lot that I do that has to do with parks and recreation, land use planning, things like that. And I'll touch on some of that, but I tried to pick out some pieces that I felt would be most relevant to a group that was coming to a transportation class. And then this next list is just to show, since I began as program manager in March, we've been reaching out and getting more partners. So even a more diverse group of people, like, for example, just pulling out a few, the Johnson Creek Watershed Council, not someone that was involved before, but now with some of the work that we're doing on the Springwater Corridor Trail, which I'll talk about, they're becoming a partner, Boys and Girls Clubs, a variety of different organizations. So, Active Living by Design as a program, again, it's supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and our national office is in North Carolina. And basically, they look at 3 domains of our built environment that impact physical activity and our ability to incorporate physical activity into our daily life. And I just want to step back for a second. The first slides that I had up said, active living and active living by design. So just to re-emphasize that active living and promoting active living is a shift from talking about getting your physical activity as you need to go spend 45 minutes on the treadmill, from 5 to 5:45, or get your exercise in each day, but really looking at how incorporating activity into your daily routines can achieve similar health benefits, and in many cases the same health benefits as getting your exercise like in a traditional gym or something like that. So that's really what my job is about. Certainly we think it's great that people want to have a regimented exercise routine or something like that, but we're really looking at promoting active living, active lifestyles, and how communities support incorporating activity into your daily life. So the 3 domains that the national office and all of the community partnerships promote are land use, transportation, and parks, trails, and green spaces. Land use is what purpose the land is developed for, where and how far apart things can be from each other, what activities can happen in certain spaces, who can live next to whom or what. These all determine your transportation choices. Not only determining your transportation choices, but the transportation network determines the character of a community, which is something I'll talk about in the Lentz community. And then parks, trails, and green spaces, looking at them not just as areas for recreation, but viewing these as transportation corridors that can link communities to community destinations and be used as routes for commuting, getting to school. It's kind of broadening the idea of what our park and trail systems are used for. ALBD has a primer that, and I put the website here, that has like 2 pages on each of the domains. And if you go to this website, there's a button right there that says Active Living Domains. Or nope, I'm sorry, I apologize. It says ALBD Primer. And you can get this PDF file that gives some statistics linking health to sidewalks in the community or people being close to a trail or things like that. So I encourage you, and lots of other resources on active living by design as well. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has made a pretty significant investment in forwarding the idea of active living and creating an active living movement. Again, if you go to the activelivingbydesign.org site and click on active living programs, you'll get a list of about 6 programs that Robert Wood Johnson sponsors that promote active living in a variety of ways. And these are just a few of them. There are more. But the Active Living Leadership Program works with government leaders to promote policies that enable active living. Active Living Network is promoting active community environments by building a national coalition of professionals. And the Active Living Research supports research that identifies environmental factors and policies that influence active living. So again, if you're interested more, I can talk later in more depth about RJW's family of programs. Before I start talking about one of our particular programs, does anyone have a question or something they'd like me to clarify from what I've said so far? And if you do, please touch the touch space. All right. As I mentioned, the Active Living by Design program, we have 3 projects in 3 different communities in the Portland metro region. One is in the Lents community in southeast Portland, one is in the interstate community of North Portland, and one is in the Damascus community in southeast Portland. Because of knowing the limited time that I would have, I'm choosing to talk about 2 of these today. I have about 4 slides on each, again, and would like to kind of expand in whatever areas the group here thinks is most interesting to them. So first I'm going to talk about our project in Lents on the Springwater Corridor Trail. If you're not familiar, Lents is a community in southeast Portland that runs from approximately 82nd to 112th and from Powell to south of Mount Scott Boulevard. And I-205 runs directly down the middle of that community. The Springwater Corridor Trail cross-sections the community from east-west at a slight diagonal in the southern part of that community. So the goal of the Active Living by Design project is to look at how we can look at the Springwater Corridor Trail as a transportation corridor for commuters, for kids to school, and as a place for recreation. Our original application was presented the concept of developing a trailhead in the Lents community on the Springwater Corridor Trail. And the Parks and Recreation Department, which is a very significant partner with us in this project because they own the Springwater Corridor Trail and the land surrounding it. They have in their master plan for the trail that they've identified a few spots for additional trailheads that they think need to be built, and the signature trailhead in that master plan is identified as being in the Lents community. So this partnership and the grant was built on that master plan, so there is some groundwork for this happening. That said, getting a trailhead built is a pretty big undertaking, and it takes a lot of money, a lot of resources, and surprise, city agencies are understaffed and under budget, and so we know that we're not going to be building a trailhead in the first 6 months of this project. So early on, after the grant was awarded and I was hired, we started talking about what our scope of the project needed to be, and we expanded the scope to include other physical improvements on the Springwater Corridor Trail. Kind of what do we need to get to a trailhead? Well, benches and tree plantings and other physical improvements, resurfacing projects that are going to improve the corridor. We also broadened our scope to include the broader bicycle and pedestrian network in the Lents community. So it's not just about the trail, although a lot of our outreach materials and a lot of our focus in Lents is on the Springwater Corridor Trail, but it's also about linking the trail to the community and also looking at other bike and pedestrian networks in Lents, which I'll talk about briefly. So I bolded here increasing access to the Springwater Corridor Trail. Increasing access is a key term and an emerging best practice in public health promotion, looking at the idea of how can environments support physical activity. Well, you want to increase access to those opportunities for physical activity. And so, what does that mean, really, increasing access? And the way that the Active Living by Design partnership here in Portland is looking at that is basically 4 ways. How to increase access by making it physically easier to access the trail, such as trailhead with maps, signs, parking, safe routes through the neighborhood to get to the trail, that type of thing. Secondly, making the trail a place that people want to go by making it more attractive, enhancing the natural beauty, learning about the natural resources on the trail or the community history associated with the trail. The trail used to be an old railroad line, an opportunity to interact with neighbors, so making it a place people want to go. Third way to increase access is to get the word out, publicize, make sure people know about the trail. I have been pretty amazed at how few Lents residents that I have spoken to are aware of the trail that runs through their community, and so that's a big part of it. I mean, again, looking back at what do we need to do to get to the trailhead and to build that community and agency support for a trailhead, you need to make sure people know about the trail, that it exists in their community, and what a resource it is. And then lastly, to advocate for public investment in the trail. Active Living by Design as a national program and the Portland Partnership are very supportive of policies and plans within government agencies that support active community environments. So there are several of our goals laid out in our work plan that speak directly to working with city agencies such as the Parks Bureau, the Bureau of Environmental Services, the Portland Department of Transportation, the Portland Development Commission, to increase their support for not just the trail, but other things that are going to support an active community environment. As I mentioned, we expanded our vision of how to make a physical change to the trail from just the trailhead to some other physical attributes. So I've just included some of those there. One thing I want to mention is that when I began this job last March, there was a group of MRF students that were working on a planning project, and they chose to look at the Lents community and do a project on using urban planning to increase opportunities for physical activity among Lents residents, and they looked specifically at the Springwater Corridor Trail and the role that that played in the Lents community as promoting physical activity. So they produced this, probably looks familiar to many of you, this nifty report here, which has been so valuable to really get us kick-started moving. There is a CD. If you're interested in more of the information that's in here, I'd be happy to share it. It really is a great resource. The students were invaluable. They did excellent work. And so I really just want to acknowledge the work that they did. In that report, they made recommendations for 3 sites where they thought it would be appropriate to locate a trailhead based on a lot of factors, what would make best sites for a trailhead. They also made some other recommendations for trail improvements. They designed a few walking and biking loops that would take you from the trail into the Lents community. So with the idea of a map, you're here on the trail, well, go visit Lents while you're here and go up and around to the school or to the community center or to the farmer's market, things like that. And they also did a lot of preliminary work looking at existing land uses in the Lents community and zoning and transportation networks, all of the streets that lead to the trail, whether they're designated as bicycle routes, things like that. And they also did surveys to get trail user input. So I do want to acknowledge the work that they have done. And outreach projects that we're working on include things such as this. One thing that we're kind of working on right now is looking at organizing community service projects to get people doing tree plantings and landscape maintenance, things like that on the trail. Okay. Speaking of outreach, back to that last one, part of Active Living by Design's Year 2 work plan, we're in Year 2 right now, is developing a strategic communications plan, and then in Year 3 we plan to unveil a pretty broad-based outreach and media campaign to talk about the ideas of active living and how community environments impact that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about when I said we expanded the scope from just the trail to look at other bike issues about the bike and pedestrian network in the Lents community. And so these are a couple ways that the Active Living by Design Partnership is looking at the bike and pedestrian network in Lents. The Oregon Coalition for Promoting Physical Activity has been involved in promoting Walk and Bike to School Day and safe routes to school for many years. In the last year, the Bicycle Transportation Alliance and Willamette Pedestrian Coalition have hired a Safe Routes to School coordinator. And if you are at all interested in the idea of safe routes to school or walking and biking to school, there are a lot of resources both at the Bicycle Transportation Alliance and elsewhere, other groups that are working on that. But what we're hoping to do this year is specifically engage the schools in the Lents community in Walk and Bike to School Day activities and safe routes to school programs. Also, the Portland Department of Transportation is making some pretty substantial physical improvements to 92nd Avenue in the Lents community. And so this is a good example of how a public agency is showing support for improving the bike and pedestrian network. Currently, 92nd Avenue doesn't have sidewalks, doesn't have bike lanes, and from Powell to Holgate, they're going to have 10-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street trees, bike lanes on both sides of the street, and parking on one side. So it's going to be a pretty significant physical change to that environment that we, as Active Living by Design, are going to help promote when that work is done, saying, you know, see how the network is now improved. Unfortunately, the construction was supposed to happen this summer, and it's been put off now until next summer. But we'll be keeping an eye on kind of how that progress goes and making sure we promote that. Another thing that is exciting to us about the improvements on 92nd Avenue is that where the trail intersects with 92nd Avenue has emerged as the most likely spot for the trailhead. So this would be, you know, from the community, the path that you take to that signature trailhead, at least part of the way now is going to have bike lanes and sidewalks. So, and then lastly, neighborhood walking and biking audits. This is a newer idea that the partnership has started to develop and figure out how we can put into place. A lot of other community partnerships around the country are doing walking and biking audits. So this could be where you have a community group with a checklist of, you know, what makes it hard and easy to bike or walk in your neighborhood. Do you have curb cuts? Do you have lighting? Do you have street trees? Do you have safe places to walk? So I will be teaching a class on walking and biking audits, or I guess class probably isn't the right term, but Portland Department of Transportation has activities in the summer in different target areas, and next summer their target area is going to be in Southeast Portland. And so I'll be teaching a class walking around the Mount Tabor Community Center, looking at how we can get groups out there with this audit in their hand, hopefully to not only learn about the community and what works and doesn't work, but to build ownership within the people that are doing the audits to want to continue to work with us on figuring out how to improve things. So these are the slides that I brought on the Lents community. And before I go to the Damascus slides, I'm not sure if people here would rather also see the Damascus slides and then decide where they'd like their questions to come from. But do people have questions now about the Lents project or anything I've spoken about? Yeah.
What sort of community involvement process have you had, like with the neighborhood association and
good question
people around there?
That's a great question. And working with a lot of existing partners, one thing that we did early on was to look at what their community involvement process was, because the Parks and Rec Department has a process, the Portland Development Commission has a process, and many of those processes include working with neighborhood associations and other local groups. Right now, we've been reaching out to community members primarily through the partners and the networks that they've established. From my previous job I did a lot of community organizing work in North Portland and learned a lot about coming into a community and saying, hey, I'm going to organize you guys, and feel it's really important to build relationships and work with existing networks there. And so in the scheme of things, we are relatively new to the Lents community and have been working through existing community networks. That said, things that we have done specifically kind of outside of our partner networks is we've built a relationship with the Waddles Boys and Girls Club. Their club in the Lents community is located right near the 205 trail and also the Springwater corridor trail. And so that's a great link for us to the community. They are involved. It just happened to be that a national initiative by the Boys and Girls Club is called The Power of One, and it's looking at how a community stewardship on local trails. And so it just happened to be, as we were starting to talk to Boys and Girls Club staff over there, learning that this was their initiative. And so we've been working with the members at the Boys and Girls Club. They've been doing trash pickups on the trail. We're looking at opportunities for them to do like a photo project, how I walk and bike around in my neighborhood. They're doing some activity diaries. So that's an example of a way, and we're hoping to use the Waddles Boys and Girls Club as an opportunity to engage their parents and their teachers, so to get more into the community. The work that we've done on habitat restoration, we've been working with a volunteer, or not a volunteer actually, he works for the Lents Habitat Restoration Organization, and he's been working for many years doing tree plantings in the Lents community. And he has some frustration about his ability to engage Lents residents in these projects. He never has a shortage of volunteers. All of his plantings are in the Lents community on that section of the trail that runs through Lents. Always has people there. Very, very rarely are they from the Lents community. I was just at a meeting last night with him. He said for one tree planting, he put out 3,000 flyers and one person from the community showed up. So knowing that, and also knowing, speaking with other partners and hearing about their successes and challenges in engaging the community, really want to learn from the experiences of other people and figure out what's the best way to say, you know, we're here in the community, and right now we think that's partnering with groups that are have been established in that community for a while.
Have you contacted Rose Community Development?
Yeah. And so Rose Community Development Rose is revitalizing Outer Southeast, and it's a community development corporation. And one thing that they're working on right now is a pretty wide Lents homeownership initiative, and they're partnering with Lents, Brentwood, Darlington, Weed and Seed, and many other partners on this homeownership initiative. So since you asked the question, I'll use this opportunity to just a little snapshot of talking about the multidisciplinary nature of, okay, health, transportation, urban planning, how can we reach out beyond our discipline to other professionals and community members, thinking about this more broadly. Well, then community development is another partner that comes into play, and thinking about how community development in many instances is about improving community livability, and a big part of the Lents Home Ownership Initiative is improving community livability. And so we're working with Rose and in communications about, you know, where's the common goals that both Active Living by Design Partnership and their goals with the Lents Home Ownership Initiative, you know, can we come together? They want to be planting trees and doing cleanups in the neighborhood, and we do on the trail and in the neighborhood, so how can we best work together? One thing that we're finding as we move forward, and we can see where the common issues are, but we can also see where the differences are, because they are dealing with some pretty serious issues in trying to improve the community livability of Lents. They have some targets of reducing the number of meth houses in the neighborhood, reducing crime. So it's been in the last few months that I've been in contact with Rose and starting to have these discussions, so I have more questions than answers right now, but it's really interesting to think about, you know, how do we engage community development in our activities, realizing that making the link between, you know, improving a neighborhood by cleaning up a meth house is different than trying to get people on the Springwater Corridor Trail. And for some of the community members that both the Homeownership Initiative is reaching out to, and we would be reaching out to, you know, thinking about their priorities and where their needs are, walking and biking, improved walking and biking network might not be up there. Or as up there, I should say. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but it's just an issue that we're dealing with. And another thing that's kind of along the same lines, community development, increasing safety in the community, thinking of the issues of safety on the trail, and issues of, there are a lot of homeless people who spend time on the trail. So that's kind of another issue with the community development. We see the commonalities, but then there are also some differences. I mean, when thinking about, we talk to people about, how would you like to see the trail improved? Well, I'd like to get the homeless people off the trail. Okay, so we can talk to homeless advocates and see what they're doing, but again, you kind of get farther and farther apart of people dealing with homelessness, which is a very serious and complicated problem, and linking that to improving a bike and pedestrian network or improving the trail. So again, more questions than answers, but it's very interesting. And someone had their hand up in the back. If they still have a question, I'm going to get them first.
Yeah, you have been talking about how like getting the trailhead and getting people on the trail would be a great thing. But then in trying to have this not just be, you know, a recreation area, but more of a transportation corridor, how are you dealing with getting the people that are on the trail to work or school or wherever they need to be going as a transportation method, not just, oh, let's go for a walk?
I might ask you to re-ask the question, because I want to make sure I answer your question, but how are we going to be promoting the trail as a transportation corridor and not just a recreation corridor? Well, one of the opportunities would be, say, with this walk and bike to school promotion and safe routes to school. For some students, this trail is very close to their school. There's actually a crossing where I think it's, I have it written down somewhere, the high 80s, where it crosses the trail that a local elementary school that is right there has identified as what they see as a dangerous crossing. So if we can address that crossing, then we can promote kids using that trail to get to school. I mean, certainly it depends on where you live. Currently, there are a lot of people who use the Springwater Corridor Trail to commute to work. A lot of people. You would be surprised in the morning. Not a lot of those people live in the Lents community. They come from farther east county and are heading downtown, but there are a lot of commuters. So what we're hoping to do is, when we have some more physical improvements to boast about on the trail, to be promoting to local businesses and those that are going to be located along the trail that, hey, this is a great route for you to get to work as well. One thing I want to mention is that our partner, Portland Parks and Recreation, just submitted a grant application last week to repave the Springwater Corridor Trail from 82nd to 92nd, so a section right there in the Lents community. And they have received some comments from BTA supporters saying, I used to commute on the trail and now I don't, because the surfacing has gotten so bad that I made a different decision and I don't use that trail anymore. So when we get the grant funds to resurface that, you can use that opportunity to say, hey, we've improved this trail. So did I address your question? You have a question?
Can we have a picture of this trail, like maybe an aerial photo or something, so we know what we're talking about? Those
You
of us who are
cannot
from
have one
Lents.
of those today because I do not have one with me. Yeah, I tried briefly to figure out how to get the map I have on there, and it didn't work. But I can tell you that if you go to the Portland Parks and Recreation website, they have a link to a map of the Springwater Corridor Trail there, and I will take that input and bring a trail map next time.
I didn't, and I could be wrong about this, but I didn't see ODOT on the list of partners, and I was just thinking about them in the context of the 205 corridor, the 205 trail, if that would maybe be a good secondary use for transportation, like using it as a transportation corridor, using the Springwater corridor, and then linking up with the 205 trail right there.
And how is ODOT involved with the 205 trail?
I thought they owned the trail.
I'm not sure of that. That could be. ODOT is not a partner in the Active Living by Design project, but they are active in the Active Community Environments Group and the Oregon Coalition for Promoting Physical Activity. So there's a lot of kind of coming and going and sharing of partners. But that's not something that I've looked into, but that's good input, looking at how if ODOT owns the or manages the land around the 205 trail. Mm-hmm.
I'm not as familiar with the entire Springwater Corridor Trail, but if there are a lot of existing users through the Lents community, and we're adding children going to school, there's varying speeds of bicycle traffic and such. Have you looked into capacity issues on the trail itself?
We haven't looked into capacity issues, and that would be something that as we got to the point where we would be promoting the trail as a route from this neighborhood to this school that we would be doing beforehand. We certainly wouldn't want to go out there and promote a child walking on that trail to school and then realizing that these commuters are whizzing down at the same time at a pretty fast and dangerous pace. So it's not something that we've addressed yet, but would before we started promoting it. Just speaking of capacity on the trail, one thing that we need more of, and as part of the work that we want to do, is collect more data on the use of the trail, because there isn't a lot for certain areas. We know that the Springwater Corridor Trail is used in some areas more than others. So what both the PSU students and the Portland Department of Transportation has a standard for data collection, and they've done some piloting of it, but just don't have the resources to get out there and do surveying. But what we'd like to do is do observational and intercept surveys on the trail to find out who's using the trail and where they're accessing the trail, and then also to be able to compare different sections of the Lents section of the trail with other sections of the trail. So when we're applying for grants and such, we can say this section of the trail is used more or less than another section or something.
The areas that you're talking about, they're all on the east side. Did you have some criteria that you selected pretty much, the east side instead of
I
some
can't
on the
speak
west
to that
side?
entirely because I was not involved in writing the grant. I was hired after the grant was awarded, and so I can speak just a little bit to that. I know it had to do with the partners that came to the table and were involved in these initial conversations about what they wanted this application to include. The interstate community was chosen specifically because the Portland Department of Transportation is involved in a very large-scale social marketing campaign up there called Travel Smart, and so they are a big partner in the Active Living by Design project, and so that's why that community was chosen. The Damascus community is being pulled into the urban growth boundary and is an opportunity to do some long-range planning. So I think it was, who was at the table and the ideas that they had as far as what would what would make a successful proposal. And I've been flipping through this just because there are a few maps of the area. I couldn't find one of the trail in there, but just thumbing through that might give you some boundaries of where the Lens community is.
Follow up on that, then, are you planning on doing something citywide or region-wide to basically promote this concept?
Well, that's part of the activities of the partnership. As I said, I manage the 3 projects, and there's a lot of work to just specifically, day-to-day activities of each of the projects, but then also kind of coalition activities, nurturing new partners, and right now in the early stages, finding that balance of taking on new projects and new initiatives while still getting 3 projects off the ground. So our intent in the short term is not to identify a new pilot community in the next few months, but through our work with partners, we're offering support so that, like, again, these local ACE groups or, if issues come up, we're offering support and inviting them to become part of the partnership, but aren't necessarily taking on, like, something in Southwest as a project right now. But there are a lot of partners, not just with Active Living by Design, but that are really interested in the idea of using transportation, land use, and parks as a way to promote health. And so, again, being able to connect people up with resources, the chances are pretty good that there's someone, in that community that's interested. Yeah.
So, for building support in the community, what are some of the barriers to creating new partnerships with private employers?
Well, I can't speak directly to that question because working with private businesses is not something that we've done yet, although it's something that we recognize is very important and will be part of our progress as we move forward. So I can't speak on kind of how we've done that with businesses. I can tell you about one idea that we have developed just in the last couple weeks, talking about these community service projects and the idea of tree plantings on the trail, for example. How can we create a package that includes to then try and sell to local businesses to sponsor a community service event that's going to be promoting trees on the trail? So if we can develop this package and then kind of, farm it out and sell it to different community businesses, say a community business can say, okay, I'll sponsor a tree planting with this much money, and then there'll be some promotion for their business for Active Living by Design and Active Living messages. So that's kind of the first way that we've thought of as far as how to engage the business community. As I mentioned in a response to another question, we are working with existing partners right now to find out what their connections are. So again, it wouldn't be me randomly knocking on a business in Lens, but through the Portland Development Commission, which has a lot of relationships with local businesses, having them help us identify who we might approach for something like this. But businesses are definitely a key part of this. And in all of the Active Living by Design literature and information talking about bringing different professionals together and people from different disciplines, the business community is often included in that list, but not as often engaged in the activities. So that's something that I think as the movement progresses, hopefully they will figure out better ways and more ways to engage the business community.
As I understand it, most DOTs, having been a DOT designer in the past, do have a standard weed and seed set for each region of the state. So wouldn't you just be able to take something off their list and you kind of have a general idea of what it's going to cost in order to put, you're going to weed and seed, some natural growth, certain tree types, and they're going to have all this stuff, estimates already worked up, already done, that they just go in and they just tabulate when they do their standard design. So couldn't you just do the same thing for this trail?
Do you mean as far as coming together with a package of what it would take to do a particular weed and seed project or a planting project? Is that what you're asking?
Essentially, yes, because they do it a per item bid, and they have all this information already tabulated on what it would cost a contractor to do. So they would have your cost of materials and your cost of labor. It's all itemized.
Mm-hmm.
It's all ready to go. You just have your standard swath and what trees you want to put down, and it's line on a bid.
Right. Well, yes, when we get to the point of being able to have the funds to do that, we'll use the resources that exist of, what it's going to take to get that done. As far as the tree plantings go, one of our partners, the Lentz Habitat Restoration Project, as I mentioned, has been organizing tree plantings in that community for more than a decade, and so he very much knows exactly what to do. So I'm certainly not going to go in and start from scratch and figure out, how much I need to pay for each tree and how many volunteers I need to have and things like that.
No, but just for the community involvement, that they would have some idea if they're going to do a section, excluding this individual. I mean, if they were to do it themselves, you would have some idea to say, if you want to do an area this big, this is what ODOT typically costs it out at, and if your people handle the labor portion, well, that's eliminated, and you already know what type of trees that are natural to the area and everything. So it would just be them looking it up and saying, what kind of input do we want to put in? That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does your organization have goals for physical activity levels that you're trying to meet? I'm thinking a walk to the store once a week probably isn't as beneficial as riding your bike to work every day.
Right. That's a great question. And so I'll tell you a couple things. Active living promotes people getting the recommended levels of physical activity as recommended by the U.S. Surgeon General. And so that number just got increased to 60 to 90 minutes of physical activity on most days of the week. So our physical activity goal is that more Oregonians, Lentz residents, whatever we're talking about that particular moment, achieve recommended levels of daily physical activity. So we've set, those are already set. And the research is showing that, again, incorporating activity into your day and achieving those levels is as significant as doing it all in one big chunk. Our project itself does not have goals. We don't have measurable objectives saying we are going to get X percent of the Lentz residents getting X percent more exercise. That's not our goal. Our goals are measured by the physical changes we make, the policies and plans that we impact, the partnerships that we develop. So, but ultimately, we do want to be impacting physical activity, but it's not like X percent. Does that answer your question? Okay.
In terms of your program, is this something, obviously it can encompass all ages of people, but are you, say, focusing more on children, adults, seniors? I think in a lot of times when I certainly see activity by design, I always think about the relationship between transportation and land use, as you mentioned, but it's in some ways maybe more important for adults because those are the folks that tend to be driving to the store and driving to work and sitting in front of a computer all day and maybe certainly in their daily life not doing a lot of exercise in terms of getting from place to place as opposed to just, say, going to the gym.
Yeah, that is another great question. And what we've just recently had a conversation about our target area in Lentz, and as we've been coming together as a partnership and developing our ideas for the Lentz community, some ideas have surfaced that focus on youth or focus on seniors or different targets. And just at a meeting we had this week talking about how it will help us be more focused if we do decide maybe specifically to focus on youth or low-income women or seniors or something, because we think that that can give us a little more focus. That said, it's kind of hard to do that just because there are opportunities to target everyone. Not just youth, but also adults. You make a really good point of when thinking of from a transportation perspective and the idea of getting people out of their cars and onto their bike or walking, then you would be targeting more adults. a lot of the focus of physical activity promotion is on youth these days because there's a youth obesity epidemic going on right now, and the long-term effects of an overweight younger generation have the potential to have some pretty significant impacts on the healthcare system in our country. So a lot of times the efforts are focused more on youth. A lot of our efforts that are kind of bubbling to the top with the partnership right now are focusing on youth. So I can say that more of our focus is on the youth. When we get to promoting commuting routes, using the trails, commuting to school and work, then we'll be targeting our messages more to adults. And kind of going back a little bit to a question about engaging the Lens community, another thing that we've been learning from partners that have been working in the Lens community is that it is hard to engage Lens adults. Not just in general, but if you are getting community members involved, it's the youth that are getting involved, maybe because they're involved with a school group or Waddles Boys and Girls Club or some other kind of activity. But getting Lens adults out engaged in these type of activities is pretty difficult. So again, targeting youth can have benefits in that way as well, just for getting participation. So I am not going to talk about Damascus, just I'm glad that people were interested in and had questions about this project. So I will just tell you what the project is. So if you would like some more information, I'm happy to share that with you. And I have cards here and all that stuff. Let me the best thing. Actually, I'm going to put this slide up just because I have it. So Damascus is a community in southeast Portland that's being pulled into the Metro's urban growth boundary, and it's the largest continuous chunk of land that's been pulled into the urban growth boundary ever, 12,000 acres, a really substantial part of land. So really an opportunity to do long-range planning, comprehensive planning, where you're really looking at a large community and the impacts that it has to the region. So as part of the Active Living by Design project, I've been involved in the Damascus Boring concept planning process that's being run by the Metro Regional Government and Clackamas County Planning Division. Been participating in land use and transportation and natural resource technical team meetings, presenting at community forums, presenting to the Damascus Advisory Committee, which is making all the final decisions on this, and participating in a 10-day design charrette. So what's been happening is that based on all the work that the technical teams and the community members have been doing, right now there are 4 design alternatives for what will ultimately be one concept plan of how this region is going to develop. And I brought these. This is probably, I don't know how easy this will be to see, but this is just kind of a map to give you an idea of the scale that they're looking at as far as this concept plan for this whole 12,000 acres. How are the land uses going to be? Oh, sure. That'd be great. Just set it up here. Thanks. So it's been absolutely fascinating to be involved in this process. Our goal was to have a health person as part of this process, which doesn't typically happen. There's not usually a health person sitting at the table in these planning conversations. And so we're hoping that our participation and input has contributed to goals and principles and design alternatives that support active community environments. Right now, these alternatives are going through evaluation to see how, through a exhaustive set of evaluation measures, and then that's going to move forward. So, again, that may or may not be very useful, but just to kind of get a sense of the broad scale, like 10,000 foot. We're not talking street level detail here.
Can you point to Damascus on there?
The whole thing is Damascus. This is the existing town center right here. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other project we have, as I mentioned, is in the interstate corridor, working with the Portland Department of Transportation and their very large-scale social marketing program called Travel Smart that is looking to, it engages individuals, talks to them about the travel choices that they make, and then gives them one-on-one encouragement to change their travel choices and reduce their car trips. So we've been involved with, the Travel Smart is a program all around the world. There are several examples of it being done in the United States, but it's been used quite widely around the world. One thing that we were able to do in Portland is, as part of their pre- and post-surveying, to add some health questions to that. The questions that they currently ask are about, what mode choice you're using, where your trips are, things like that, but not asking about health. And so we had the opportunity to add some health questions to this Travel Smart survey, and then we'll be promoting the results of the survey throughout the interstate community through local papers and media outlets and things like that.
Talk about some of the unique, maybe land use things in Damascus that would relate to active living campaign, or I don't know if there's anything.
Can I go back to the, do you mean like existing geographical features?
I was just looking at the map and I saw there's parks and there's buildings and just wondering what kind of things you'd look at.
Oh, goodness, I didn't mean to go to this slide here. I have, the reason I'm clicking through here is because I have a website that has the, okay, this is a neat little slide that shows you how interconnected network reduces walking and biking distances. This is a child's route to school. Sorry about that. But I have a website that has a lot of information on the Damascus Boring Concept Planning process. They have extensive documentation. They have a list of, they created existing conditions for transportation, land use, natural resources, and so it lists all of the features that they needed to consider. I had no idea this was going to do all this. And another one, this one doesn't, there you go, that one. So there are several buttes in Damascus. Damascus has a lot of natural resources that need to be protected or should be protected. A lot of people feel very strongly about that. So that was one thing that was always at the top of the conversation, both within the technical committees and the communities, was how can we respect the natural landscape that exists in Damascus as far as the waters and the buttes. So it was really at the forefront of people's minds, and when you're talking about urbanizing an area that is rural residential right now with a lot of these natural elements, and it's going to be, you know, the size of Beaverton in 15 years. It's always a topic of conversation. But I would encourage you, if you're interested, to look at the existing condition reports online. And also all of these maps that I showed you, the alternatives that are going through the evaluation process right now, those are available online. The goals and principles that all the teams laid out are online. So again, from this website, you can get some pretty extensive documentation on that.
So because it's not entirely built out yet, is there a sense among residents as well as among folks in the program that they can do this right and build it so that there is really active living built into it?
That's a big question. So I certainly can't speak for everyone, but there is, I think, the hope that because it is such a big chunk of land, that there is more opportunity than there would be if it was like leapfrog development to be able to have that vision. And there are so many committed residents that have been part of this process that are really pushing for that vision. And a lot of people on the technical teams that have, you know, a lot of confidence that all the effort that's going into this planning process really can create a complete community. That said, it's at the planning stages right now, and so they're planning with the vision that they'll be able to create a really sustainable community that supports not only active living, but a lot of the principles that that they want to promote. Again, it's planning, and there are a lot of stages to get to implementation, so you got to start with that vision. Erin?
This is a 5-year grant, right, or is it 3 years?
It's a 5-year grant from Robert Wood Johnson, yeah. And so we expect over time that some of the projects right now are more discrete, like the interstate project is going to be over when the Travel Smart is over and concept planning process. And so kind of going back to a question before, in 5 years, you know, I can't tell you what's going to be on my plate in 5 years as far as new projects.
Does Robert Wood Johnson have, I know you talked a little bit about the outcomes you're looking for, but since this is an ongoing project of Robert Wood Johnson, do you know where they're headed with their grant funding? Are they looking to do more of this individual small projects for the grants, or are they looking at something within a bigger framework?
Well, the community partnerships around the country are pretty varied. So some of them are less, you know, are more broad, and some are more specific. So there's some flexibility as far as how those funds are being used.
What's a charrette? For those of us with a limited vocabulary.
That's okay. I just learned the word 7 months ago. A charrette is, do you have a good definition for a charrette? Does anyone? This charrette was, we got together for 10 days all day long, and it's really a really intensive design charrette. The origin of the word means French cart or something like that, that references French architectural students making last-minute changes to their sketches as they were wheeling them down the street in their cart. I'm not quite sure how that translates into a design charrette. Something like that? And so the design charrette was, it was really fascinating. Being from public health, never heard of it. But what we did was we had interdisciplinary design teams and a team of designers. So for 10 days, every morning we'd come together in small groups. There'd be like 100 of us in like groups of 10 at tables, talking about the goals and principles that were laid out by the technical teams and just start putting stuff on the map. And these designers then every day would come back with new iterations of these maps that I showed you. I mean, you know, I could at some point show you the earlier maps and just the progression of how those maps change really every day. Like we would meet all day and then the designers would be meeting all night, drawing up sketches and taking people's input and then coming out with these alternatives. So
this is like a more advanced form of brainstorming where you're actually producing product?
Yes, yes. And there is a National Charrette Institute, I think is the name of it, that is out of Portland, Oregon. So if you typed in Charrette, Google, you would get to this National Charrette Institute at Portland, and they could give you a much better explanation than I just did.
I'll add, it's also a process that's sometimes used with, well, there were probably some public members involved in this
Yes.
one? Or, okay.
Yes.
Sometimes it'll be shorter term, maybe a full day or a 2-day charrette with members of the community. It's just a much more intense input process, really focusing on real designs instead of just talking.
And the fact there's a 10-day charrette was very long. Like, so that's on the long end for charrettes. And the charrette included a community forum at the very beginning and at the end, and one in the middle, so that the community, there were community members that were involved in the day-to-day process, but then also community members could come and reflect and make comments. So the community had, in some cases, we got input that too much opportunity, you know, too many community forums. It's like that balance of, you know, really wanting to open it up to the public process and then hearing, you know, if we have another community forum, you know, when are we going to do something? You have a question back there? Oh, behind you, sorry.
Sorry. So the active living by design movement is, I think, really awesome. And I was just curious, is there much in the way of addressing suburban problems? I don't know if Damascus would be the closest example to that, but it seems like more urban lifestyles are generally more healthy, I would venture, than
again, the community partnerships all across the country are doing a really wide variety of things. So some are focused more on suburban communities, and also a lot of the active living principles are being used in suburban communities. As far as, you know, the stereotypical suburban sprawl and the cul-de-sacs, and so as new communities are springing up in the suburbs, in some cases there are people that are in there early on trying to get their input in to figure out how that can not become another cul-de-sac village and stuff. So suburban communities are definitely part of it. So I'm not sure about the time. I'm happy to take questions.
It's already been answered.
Did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say it was CharretteInstitute.org.
Thank you. CharretteInstitute.org. And do you have a question?
My question is about the walking and biking audits. Can you give a little bit more information about those? Are those just primarily audits of the physical infrastructure, or do they also include usage patterns?
The ones that I'm most familiar with do not include usage patterns. They are more of a checklist of looking at the physical environment. That's not to say that one with usage patterns wouldn't be, you know, really interesting and have some additional information to add. The ones that a lot of the community partnerships are using around the country, and what I will be speaking about later in the summer, are ones that just look at the physical environment.
Time for one more question.
Anyone?
I haven't been out to Damascus too much, but I gather it's pretty much a rural farming type community. So when I think of active living, I think of either very dense urban cities or very dense U.S. cities, or certainly most European cities and towns, where employment and shopping is all located very close to residences. So in Damascus, which probably for the most part is pretty spread out as it is now, to try and pitch density to them as a way of, there's active living by design.
Mm-hmm.
So the design, I would imagine, would be compact development. That must be quite at odds with a lot of how longtime residences have lived.
It is. There are always conversations going on about when you're talking about a community that's going to grow from 12,000 people to 70,000 people in 10 years, and again, anticipated to be the size of Beaverton. That's very much at odds with a community that has very rural roots. And the whole Damascus planning process started with a community visioning process and identifying some core community values that were then going to lead the development of all the goals and principles. Well, the main core principle that rose to the top was retain the rural character of our community. So you made a good point. That's at odds with developing a community of 70 to 70,000 people. So there are people on both sides of the fence. Some people are still struggling with that conflict, although from my limited experience and perspective, this process has been going on for a long time, a year and a half, and so if it's going to happen, let's make it happen in a way that that is at least good for our community. So we realize that it's going to be not a rural community anymore, but also looking at strategies to promote active living that can help retain a rural community, such as a trail network. That's something that in the Damascus community we're really looking at. I mean, bike lanes, yes, sidewalks, yes, but think of some of those spaces here in Portland where all the sidewalk cafes and all those things. There will be places like that in Damascus, absolutely. But thinking of how we can link community destinations through a more rustic trail, walking, biking path, rather than your traditional bike lanes and sidewalks, may be a way to kind of retain that rural character, but still provide opportunities for people to do their day-to-day activities, being physically active.
I want to thank you, Noelle, and remind folks next week, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the topic is World Cities in 2050.
2104.
Oh, wow. Looking far into the future and large world cities and what transportation might look like there. Gary Spanovich?
Gary Spanovich from Holistic Peace.
Yes, so and who's worked with Metro and other places in terms of transportation planning. So I encourage you to attend or watch then. And thank you again, Noelle.
And thank you, everyone, for coming and your questions.